Hello. Welcome back to a new episode of Art Mart Podcast, episode 4, season 1, with our special guest, Mark.
Well, I'm not that special.
I think you're pretty cool.
You're special to us,
You're
man.
special.
I'm okay.
Deep down,
You're
in
a
my
special
heart.
guest today.
Ooh.
You know what that means? You got the good mic this time.
Is that why your apartment's so salty
He's Becky
right
with a good mic.
Well, let's just go ahead and dive into it. Art Mark.
Art. God damn it.
Art Mark.
Art Marty Mark.
Let's go
Mark.
ahead, let's dive into a little bit about you and your art. Like, where did you start? Where is it at right now? Just give us a full lowdown, bro.
Well, it started when I was a child, obviously.
As it usually does.
I was born once. Not again, though. Yeah.
I, too, was born at a young age.
It's true. I was 0 years old when I was born. Fun fact.
Depends on who you ask.
When he was a young Marky Mark.
Yeah, so, no, I did stupid-ass little doodles when I was a kid. And then all the way throughout, like, middle school and high school, it turned into something. And I took, like, a huge break from it for a while until, like, a year ago.
What do you mean it turned into something? What's that something?
Back in high school and whatnot, I won a whole bunch of awards for my stuff. And I was accepted to the Art Institute of Seattle, but ended up not being able to go.
What awards did you win?
I won Best in Show in 4 different art competitions in the area. The South.
The South. That's the era. He won some competitions in the South.
Yeah.
Because it's not like this is an interview. We're trying to learn information.
I know.
About you.
Okay. Well, I went to high school in Missouri. So it was in southwest Missouri in Joplin, which, yes, that's the town the tornado hit.
The one and only.
I was thinking about Janice Joplin when you said that. Not even
No. Yeah, the tornado was horrible. That was a fun time. But, yeah, so...
Did that inspire your art?
No.
Good question.
That was a long-winded
good plot twist.
You said you just got back into art like about a year ago?
Yeah, I didn't like start taking it seriously again until like a year and a half maybe
Okay.
ago.
Yeah, so
Which is my Instagram is still growing and not very blown up yet.
So let's do a little plug real quick. You want to tell everybody what your Instagram is?
At markjones.art.
If you don't follow them, you will burn in hell. It's a fact.
If hell existed, that'd be fine, but you know.
yep, we've seen the people who don't respect his
Our
art.
listeners might have a different
We've
view.
seen what
so-
happens.
So what made you want to start just like drawing doodles or something? Were you just bored in class and
Yeah, pretty
drawing
much.
the
That's
margins?
kind of how it started. Like originally I used to do a whole bunch of weird ass little tribal things and you know, it's like sci-fi shit, like little dragons and things as nerdy children do.
Was there like a catalyst that you stopped and a catalyst that made you start again?
That's kind of hard. I would say the stopping was just a whole bunch of shit going on in my life, and the starting back up was missing creating. So I kind of just, you know, started back to it, used it as a coping mechanism, because that's what we do as adults.
That sounds like a pretty healthy coping mechanism.
It actually is, yeah.
All things considered.
No, it actually is. It helped me through a whole lot.
Yeah, and it's cool because, I mean, especially as a coping mechanism, you're pretty good at it, and I've been actually picking up a lot from you.
That's true. Yeah, I've been trying to teach you things about colors and whatnot lately.
Yeah. So whoever's watching this really like Mark is really helping out with like graphic designs and making sure like the studio that we're hopefully going to have in the next few months will be designed right, have the right color schemes. What would you maybe like consider your art style?
Oh, that's hard because it falls in a weird gray area between surrealism, visionary, and abstract.
Can you maybe explain this for us a little bit to people that don't know?
Okay, surrealism.
Like each of those terms.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So surrealism is artists like Salvador Dali and whatnot back in like the 60s. They had that art movement. It actually stems back to about the 20s with the original surrealist artist that I cannot remember the name. But I believe they were French. Not 100 on that. Don't fact check me. But so that style
How
is
could we
very
fact check
like
such a specific fact?
Well, you got the pro fact checker right here.
right?
Let's just Google it, man.
Yeah. So
let's
I
Google
remember
this, Jake.
specifically the very first considered surrealist painting was almost this pyramid triangle that had like a gradient with it. I forget exactly who did it, but somehow that was the one that spawned surrealism, which was also almost an offshoot with the Dadaist movement of art as well, because it was the same era. So Surrealism took things like Salvador Dali's lobster telephone sculpture, where Dadaism took things that shouldn't be art and made them art because they put their name on it. So it was all kind of a very similar movement, but diverging in separate directions.
So would Dadaism be stuff like the guy who slaps a banana on the wall and then puts his name
Yes and no. That would be modern Dadaism, essentially. But the most famous Dadaist one was this one of like just a urinal with a signature on it. Again, forget who exactly did it. But that was in, I believe, the 60s that happened.
Why am I throwing stuff away?
Why? It's real. Like, you
Slap my name on my signature on that.
could have just signed that carpet yesterday.
on? That's true.
Okay, well, for anyone who wasn't viewing, a little studio update. We cleaned up the studio yesterday. We worked hours on it, and my dog had a little bit of an episode.
A little bit
and
is not what I would
Fair
call
bit.
It was a biohazard.
It was a lot of poop.
Trip almost vomited into a bag,
I
and he
did
tasted
vomit.
it.
I did vomit into a
And he
bag.
tasted it.
Well, yeah, because I vomited the bag and I smelled it. I was like, oh, I taste it.
It was so bad.
It was a biohazard status.
It was radioactive.
Dre,
nasty.
you okay over there? You're
Trey's losing it behind the camera right now.
doubled over in pain. Laughter, I can't really tell.
So I know we've gone off on a little bit of a tangent here.
Back to
But,
back to
so that
explaining
kind of
those-
yeah.
explaining
So
those.
surrealism is more of the concept of taking somewhat familiar objects, but then turning them unfamiliar and strange to almost give you a feeling of uneasiness, or just like a different feeling that you would get than what normally would be, felt. So visionary falls in the realm of a lot of people that do drugs typically. That is, I'm not wrong. That's a lot of artists. Like the most famous one is Alex Gray, who's done art for Tool. Cam De Leon, who's also done art for Tool.
Well, there's other the psychedelic ones like on the front cover.
Yeah, like the ones of like all the faces with the different
Yeah.
colors and the third eye, and that all is visionary. And then
the turd eye.
after
We were talking
yesterday-
about poop. I'm just
after
like
yesterday,
it's kind of in my head right now.
Marley has the turd eye.
Oh no, that was a shitty joke.
Anyway, keep telling us about visionary
Sorry,
art.
my bad. I'm doing bad.
So
I'm being bad
anyway,
today.
it's all typically mildly drug related. A lot of people that create that art are very into DMT, acid, and shrooms, and it's very motivated by the visions that they get from these. Where I don't do any of that, and I've been asked how many drugs I do with my art, and everybody's so surprised when I say none.
Well, it's not none. You're currently holding alcohol.
Yeah, well, okay, as far as like psychedelics
Fair.
or any kind of mind-altering drugs, I don't really do. I will drink alcohol. I do nicotine, but that's
Yeah,
it.
you said doo-doo.
all of us
joke.
here are completely sober.
Rah.
Sober as a judge.
Yeah.
Sober.
And then abstract art is obviously abstract art. That's a
Right.
whole spectrum of artwork, but it's just things that aren't realism, essentially. That's like the easiest way to define that.
So then why do you add abstract as a third qualifier if it's kind of more of an umbrella term for the previous two?
Because some of my work actually falls into abstract.
Wouldn't all of it? If
All of it falls into abstract, but the other two don't always fall into the abstract category. Like some of my art will be visionary and surrealism, but that doesn't always mean my art will be visionary and surrealism. Some of it is just abstract.
Okay.
We need a Venn diagram right now.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Art is very complicated to follow.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I think you're the first person.
It's an art form to follow art.
Some might say.
I think you're the first person to actually give us terms and terminology on art
Yeah.
itself, which I think is just fucking awesome. So like, maybe going back, so was there a catalyst or anything that made you stop and start?
I mean, it was just going through a lot of stuff in life at that point in time. So I didn't have time. I still barely have time, but I make time now.
Well, let's double back on this a little bit because I know like there's a lot of people out there, struggling artists, trying to make anything kind of work. Is there any kind of like maybe helpful tips you can give someone who's like going through that? Maybe like they're thinking about giving up too. Like maybe try something different.
I would just say always keep pushing, because even if you don't become successful at it, you're still successful to yourself, and the audience will come with you. They'll like when you create, they will show up because my
build,
Instagram
they will
following
come.
is only like 250 people, but I still have commissions like every week, every 2 weeks. I'm still selling works, and almost all of it comes from Instagram, and my following is tiny, so I can only imagine how overwhelmed I'll be when it's big.
So if now your art is surreal, abstract, visionary, what was it when you first kind of graduated from doodles in the margins of your notebook to something you actually call
I
your
always
growth?
did a lot of like, I would say it's almost always fallen at least in surrealism, unintentionally, because I was always inspired by like Salvador Dali as a kid. I would say my biggest inspirational moment for me as a child that I didn't realize would define me was going to the opening of the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh, the very first time it opened, where Andy Warhol is a Pittsburgh native. A lot of people don't know that just because he did most of his career in New York.
Right.
Yeah, so with all that, I remember going with my mom, and it's one of the very only good memories I had with her, because that was a whole situation. But I remember specifically, there were skydiving Elvises and Marilyn Monroes at the opening. It was a whole interesting thing, as you would expect with Andy Warhol. And,
Okay.
yeah.
Wait. So was it like full Elvis impersonators?
Yes.
Just
They were like,
Were they in shape?
no.
I hope not. They're Elvis
They were
impersonators.
round. Round
They
is
should
a shape.
be.
Yeah.
They're
Round
Elvis
is a shape.
impersonators.
Round is a shape. But yeah, so like I didn't have the full appreciation for seeing his original works when I was there because I was like 7 at the time. But
They obviously had influence
Elvis
yeah,
Presley.
like looking back, it had
skydivers.
influence on me because I'm a very big
got me all
fan
shook
of pop art, which again, back to the banana tape on the wall thing, I feel like was actually derived from an Andy Warhol inspiration because of the banana painting he did.
You're
for the
right.
Velvet Underground.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah. So I feel like it was like a nod towards that.
Is the Andy Warhol Museum that's in Massachusetts across the border from New York? Like the main one?
No, there's only one Andy Warhol.
Which one am I thinking of? Oh, no, it's Norman Rockwell. Never
Yeah.
mind. I'm as stupid as I sound.
No, actually,
That's fine.
the Andy Warhol's are just all in
Yeah.
this apartment because we can
Right.
afford it. We bought all the paintings. Everything's ours.
It's just not on camera.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right, of course. All of our Andy Warhol paintings
Little
are
known
behind
fact,
camera.
I was his factory girl.
You what?
Sorry, what is
Actually,
a
can
factory
you?
girl?
Okay.
Okay, so there was a pseudo documentary type movie about his
pseudo
life.
documentary.
It was okay,
movie?
so it was like based on a true story, but not everything was 100.
So it's
it
like
was,
a biopic. Like
Yeah, it was
okay.
called Factory Girl, and it was about one of the girls that was basically his fuck toy that lived through.
Okay, those words made me very
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Well, that's what it was. But he called
That is
his
separately awesome.
But he called his studio.
But when you put them
Yeah.
all together, it makes a cornucopia fuckery.
It's true. But he called his studio the factory. So any
I
girl
still don't
that
like
he
that.
was
Oh,
seeing
no.
was the factory girl because
De
they
facto
were-
factory
Yeah,
girl?
they were basically like his arm candy of the week.
So we're just talking about a fuck factory.
So then, how did you become the de facto factory fuck factory girl?
Oh, because I'm on the podcast, I'm getting attention.
Oh snap! Because we're famous.
We will be.
Hey,
That's the goal.
The goal is not to be famous. The goal is for everyone to have a good time.
Also, that we do that anyway, even if there's no viewers. We're still gonna keep
particularly
doing
a
this.
good time as a factory girl for Andy Warhol.
Hey.
Anyone trying to sign up? Go to www.Andrew Warhol.
You might have
Fuck
tried
me
saying
face.
some of those words separately, saying them all
That was a
together.
lot of sounds.
Google will fix my translations. So yeah, go for it.
I don't, Dre,
That
is
was a
that
lot of
how
sounds you
editing
just
works?
made.
Not at all.
You can't separate all 8 words
I hope you do.
that he said at the same time. Okay, so you went to this museum
Yeah.
when you were like 7 or 8, saw the Elvis
it was a
skydivers.
defining factor for me because looking back on it, I realized even though I didn't necessarily have the appreciation at that age for something like this, like looking back and realizing that I've seen most of Warhol's original screen printings. I got to see the Brillo boxes, all that stuff in person as a young child was just highly motivating. Also, growing up in Pennsylvania, I got to see Falling Waters, which is one of the most famous architectural buildings in the United States. So I got to go to that as a young
That's
age.
the Frank Lloyd Wright
Yes.
building? Okay.
Yeah. It's about 2 hours from Pittsburgh, if I remember. It's been a while since I've been there, but I remember going to it as a kid as well with my grandparents. I also used to frequent the art museum in Pittsburgh as a child. Again, not much appreciation at that age, but looking back now.
Well, but I mean, like, okay, I understand like there wasn't much appreciation there at all, or even like
No, because when you're that age, you don't understand what you're looking at.
But what I'm sensing is like you already had like a keen fucking
Yeah.
sense for it already because you were doing all these things. Like I'm being
Yeah.
honest, like the coolest thing I saw when I was a kid was a fucking Stouffer's box. Like my parents were very uncultured in that aspect. Great parents, love you guys. But
Did
like,
Andy Warhol
you're very
design the
uncultured.
Stouffer's box?
It was an Andy Warhol.
Love you guys, but
He
you're
actually,
culture.
if he was still alive at the point when Stouffer's hit its prime of TV dinners, he could have actually designed a Stouffer's box. It would be up there with the Campbell's soup and, you know, all that shit that he did. That, looking
art.
at it now, it's like, oh, well, that's all simple, how to get famous for it. But he was the first one doing it.
I don't think
at the
anyone's
time.
ever said, "Oh, Andy Warhol is simple."
No,
Well,
as a
his-
person, he was not by any means.
But like his style was very simple.
Yeah,
the way he
and
projected
what's actually
things.
funny is going to an exhibit here recently at the MCA. I went to the Keith Haring exhibit, not realizing that him and Warhol were buddies back in the day. But I was always inspired by Keith Haring as a child too, not even knowing his name. Like I didn't know who this artist was. I just remember seeing his works.
So you just made those connections, just kind of
Yeah,
like,
and then when I went to the exhibit, I was like, "Oh my god, I know who this is." I used to draw shit like this as a child, like because you mimic what you see when you're a kid, and honestly, most art is theft because you pull inspiration from everything.
What's
the
that
trick?
Banksy quote?
Yeah,
The
no,
artist
Banksy
are-
quote
it's
is
not a
very
basic quote, it's
true.
Mozart.
No, the Banksy.
Mozart said, "I am not a great artist. I'm a good thief."
Well, yeah, that was Mozart, but the Banksy quote, it's
Good artist
similar to
borrow,
that.
great artist steal.
Yeah, something along
He
those
stole that
lines.
from fucking Mozart.
You know what? It's not like Mozart could hear it anyway.
That's Beethoven's son.
Shush.
Wait,
I don't
Mozart
pay
was
attention
very
to
much so of hearing.
That's
he was
fine.
like a fuckboy back in the day.
That's fine.
Mozart was like the #1 bachelor. I've seen the movie.
I've seen them.
He also had incredibly terrible ADD.
Yeah.
I'm sure he did.
Which most musicians
Like, a lot of
of that
really
caliber
creative
would, because
people.
like you're tickling them ivories pretty damn hard at that point, and composing whole ass things.
Composing. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Much
Anyway.
to Salieri's dismay.
But yeah, so like going to a Keith Haring exhibit was great for me because not even realizing his name at the time, and then I was like, oh, I know this guy, and just pulling
Was it
that
the similarities,
connection.
or was it like?
What do you mean, like similarities?
Was there similarities between the art that like made you kind of make the connection you think before you even knew who it was?
Oh no, he's
Or
very
you were
distinct
just
style.
drawn to them.
Yeah, I see.
That's
what you
even
did
cooler
there.
though.
Yeah, no, Keith Haring is a very distinct style. It's a whole lot of just straight line art, and it's a bunch of just random figures like dancing around and stuff. It's very tribal-esque looking. Is a good way to describe it.
Is it?
It is.
Because I can't picture that, so it must not be that.
Google-
I'm gonna
Google
look at. I'm
Keith
actually
Haring.
gonna look
Dude,
up Keith
Google
Haring
Keith Haring right now, and
because I need to. See
we'll keep the
what this-
conversation going while you're doing that.
You sure you can do that without me?
But can I be
don't
honest?
know.
I'm actually really glad we actually had like a segue that was actually kind of art related.
Keith Haring. Let's see.
What do you mean?
Because usually we talk about like what is it,
Oh, yeah.
cicadas at
Oh
one time.
shoot! Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen his work.
Exactly.
before. It's
I
like-
didn't know who he was, but I was inspired by him as a kid. And then when I realized
I don't
that's
know
who
what
it was,
Doc
when I
Martens.
went there, I was like,
Yeah.
holy shit.
I've seen. Okay.
Can you show the camera?
Very tribal,
one of those.
esque.
I mean, we'll overlay it. All right,
we,
cool.
we can do it in post, as they say.
We're just trying to hook up the fans.
I know his most famous piece is the Radiant Child, even though he never technically named
one's the
any of
Radiant
his.
Child?
It's the one of the baby with the lines around
Now I'm
it.
gonna have to look up a Radiant
Yeah.
Child is.
But he never named a single one of his pieces. All the names.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, all the names given to the pieces were given by
The community?
the public. Yeah. So he never named a single piece.
Some of these Doc Martens in that style. Oh, I want those. If anyone wants to buy
Anyway,
a pair of
that's,
Keith Haring Doc Martens, I wear a
Left
size
turn.
10.
That's okay.
well, I saw this everywhere. Like there's all of his shirts nowadays. And
Well, like
everything.
he started in New York, basically as an artist that would do
Hey, New York represent.
chalk paintings on like advertisement like slots in subways that weren't occupied by an ad. And it got to the point where he just got so notorious for doing it that even when he was arrested numerous times Or it's basically vandalism because it was graffiti. And,
It's literally vandalism,
Yeah,
not basically
it's
vandalism.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the definition.
literally
But
vandalism.
it got to the point for him that he became so notorious for it that even when he was arrested and the cops realized who he was, they would let him go because they were like, "Oh, we support your art. This isn't necessarily
That does not
vandalism."
sound like a 1980s New
No,
York
you
City
would be
cop to me.
surprised. You would actually
There's
be
not enough
surprised.
heads being bashed in with mahogany nightsticks.
Oh, you're not
New
wrong.
York was a
It was a-
tumultuous place in the
Yeah.
1980s.
It's true. It was. I mean, that's right when Gangs of New York happened, right?
That was the wrong 80s. That was the 1880s.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
We digress.
So
never do
yeah, but going to a Keith Haring exhibit, not even realizing that was his name or who he was, and just showing up and being like, "Oh, this is someone who inspired me as a kid."
That's got to be a cool feeling.
Well, it was. I was like, I didn't even know this guy, and I've been to every MCA exhibit since I've lived here. The last one to me, I didn't quite get, but I mean,
What do you mean
all
by that?
Art is subjective. I just didn't. I didn't feel the works personally. Like I forget who the last one was. That's how much it didn't even resonate with me.
What was it?
It was an artist that did a whole lot of stuff with like old fire hoses and things.
Oh,
Yeah, like it was interesting.
was it specifically just old fire
Yeah,
hoses?
because his studio was an old firehouse. So his
Ghostbusters.
way of doing art was literally using everything from the neighborhood around him, including stuff that was abandoned in the place he turned into a studio. So I get where he was going. I just personally
This
didn't
sounds
feel it.
incredibly cool to me. But
Yeah, it was cool. Like I said, but
Fire
as far
hose
as I
art?
just don't exactly remember the name of the guy. You could probably look up who the MCA exhibit was before Keith Haring, because it was the one right before it.
Well, kind of piggybacking off that, like, you know, other artists listening to this right now. So, like, what I'm hearing is a lot of perspective, especially like going back and like, looking at, like, this is where I got all my inspiration
Yeah.
from, this is where I got my ideas from. What could you tell other people out there that are, like, maybe trying to find some creative outlet or something that maybe like looking back, like, what do you think they should do?
Anything, like literally, that's all it takes is just either pick up a pen, grab some shit off the street, quite literally.
So
Like,
just go out and try.
yeah, just try,
anything.
just create. That's all you have to do.
you know what? I actually really want to know, and we can throw it on the video. What is your favorite piece of art that you have made?
Oh, that I
Ooh,
made.
that's a
tough
good one. That's a good
because
one.
most of my stuff is actually untitled. But
We can still
there-
find it because you can provide it.
There are 3 in particular that I can narrow it down to.
Okay.
One is one I did in, I believe it's 2017, maybe 2018. It took me 6 months to do, and I did it entirely on my phone, so it was a digital piece.
Okay.
But I spent
really phoning that
so
one in.
much time on it, and I feel it's my masterpiece, even though it's not my most liked work. And I want to try and recreate something like that in a physical medium, because I just don't have time for physical as much anymore as I used to. So most of my stuff lately is digital, because I'm much quicker at producing digitally than I am physically.
Well, also I want to put a little plug for Mark real quick. We're going to start opening a shop for Art Mart on tripstocents.com. We're going to have some of his stuff up. We'll have some merch up in a few weeks, but make sure you guys are supporting local artists like Mark here. As soon as this is up, make sure you buy all of his shit.
Literally all of it.
All
I
of it,
will
just buy all
shit
of it.
in a bag and sign it just for you.
Now
I
that's
am
Dadaism.
so
Now that's
done with poop.
doo-dooism.
I'm just done with poop. I'm so sick of
It
it.
could technically be
That's
an art
why we're
form.
sending it
Depends
off
on
to
the meaning I
you.
put behind it.
But what was so? Describe that piece.
Yeah.
Instead of it saying it was
So-
made on your phone, took a few months. What is it like?
So it falls in the visionary category.
Okay.
My inspiration, actually, so a lot of my inspirations from art also come from Renaissance era, like religious paintings.
Okay.
Based on like the emotionless expressions, the just feeling of that other force of religion that is in paintings. Even though I'm not religious myself, I just like the feeling that the old masters of the Renaissance created. So I take a lot of inspiration like that, taking like the hand of the blessing of the Catholic Church was involved in this piece. Like if you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a very specific like hand gesture with like the 2 fingers up like this.
Yeah, I know what you want to talk about, yeah.
So for those that are hearing, I'm sorry. Anyway, but
He's not. He's laughing his butt off right
that's
now.
true. So yeah, I take a lot of inspiration from Renaissance artwork as well as combining a whole bunch of other elements into my own. And that's kind of what that turns into, where everyone's like, oh, you do aliens as art. That's not what I feel it is.
Do people tell you that a lot? You just do aliens?
Every fucking day that they see my stuff, they're like, I love that you draw aliens. But it's not at all for me. I just love distorting objects in general. And that's kind of what makes it look alien, but it's really more experimentation with human anatomy that I go for.
Don't you think that kind of corresponds with like a lot of people that are in music that are trying to get a certain sound out, and it's like, well, I love your rock music or whatever. Like you're missing like the subculture, the subculture
which
of the whole
I get
thing.
that, and that is kind of half gatekeeping in a way too, unfortunately.
Right.
But as far as what I do, I hate that it's always associated as aliens because that's not how I view my stuff. It's a lot of studying of anatomy and figuring out how to make it into a lot more beauty. I use the whole movements of like the forms of the face because there's different planes, the way things interact with each other. So you follow these paths, and a lot of my line work through it brings the paths from like, what's the term? Like when you look at a face, you can see where lines would be, but you don't actually see the lines. Like they're just, like you can follow them with your eye. I forget what the term is for that. But so instead of just where those lines could be, I put them in, and that makes it into its own unique thing, following the rhythms of the face and anatomy and whatnot.
Well, see, there's obviously a lot more. The whole staff is going to learn about art before we can even comment on something like that.
Right? Yeah.
I can try to say something.
I've put a
try
lot
to
of
sound
time
smart.
studying anatomy, color theory, etc. Even just design in general, composition. So I always try and follow like the golden rule and all that kind of stuff.
The golden rule being?
Typically, it's something that where your attention is drawn to one point, but you have to have separate points on the piece. Typically, it falls in a triangle of some form. Like there are 3 points. It doesn't have to be like a perfect obtuse or right angle or anything. It's those 3 spots in particular are arranged in a way that are drawing to the eye, where you're drawn to one part, but then you also have other interests elsewhere. And that kind of does go away from a lot of the old Renaissance art, like the Garden of Earthly Delights as a good example of that, where it was just a clusterfuck of everything everywhere. But when you actually break it down, a lot of people thought there weren't perspective with it, but the perspective is the direct center, and the like horizon line and everything spreads out in almost a flower formation instead of like a horizon and up like you would see with normal painting. There actually is design to it. It's just not what you would think normally.
Well, going back to, and I'm going to be the one that I'll speak for everyone. There's kind of art and in depth. The best word I could come up with that one. Art and in depth with that.
An
Art,
newbie,
not
artfully challenged. Artistically challenged.
Artistically challenged. Yeah,
we are
like,
artistically challenged.
yeah. Don't twist that social media.
Oh boy.
What are some great questions that we could ask artists that would give us a better perception on art itself?
Or bad questions too.
Yeah, okay.
We'll
so,
go good first and let's go bad.
All right.
good questions. I would definitely say always ask about the background, what inspires them, because everyone pulls from something different.
Okay.
Yeah, so they love talking about what motivates them. Because even if it's just somebody doing something as simple as like acrylic pouring, they're still motivated by something. Or someone that does really in-depth oil painting, they draw their inspirations from somewhere. So everybody loves talking about where they pull their inspiration from, because a lot of times it's things that aren't even very well known. Just things that they've seen through their life, or even local artists somewhere that just planted a seed in their brain of a design and they run with it.
What's another good question? Then we'll go to bad questions.
Oh boy, put me on the
I'm
spot.
so excited for bad questions.
Right. We put you on the spot because we're literally interviewing you.
Yeah, well,
What?
Yeah, in case you haven't noticed.
yeah, it's true.
I don't usually sit on the couch with a microphone an inch in front of my face.
Right? I mean, that's every day for us, right?
I mean, how else can I make money off this? I got to do OnlyFans just to get this working.
Well, that's next.
Well, for you, it'd be only fan, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
There's no
that one
fans in
person
this
is it's the hardcore 80-20 rule. 80% of all my profits come 20% of my hardcore users.
Now, the other question is, if you have AC, can you have an OnlyFan?
Well, they still have fans in the air conditioner.
That's true.
Technically, yeah.
Well, not even
DCs
technically.
have
That's
fans.
literally how it
Yeah.
works.
That fan scares my penis.
Oh.
I don't know,
Well, I
but if
don't-
you have a heater, then do you technically only have a fan at that point?
Well, it's still a fan because it still has to move the air.
But is it only fans?
No, that'd be more than one.
So what's another good question to ask artists?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, back to that.
And we're back.
Yeah. I would also
Don't touch that dial.
ask artists about technique because a lot of us have developed our own in our own time.
Can you maybe explain that a little more, what technique is, what it means?
Yeah, okay, so technique is all about the way you craft your pieces, honestly. Like for me, I have a bunch of my own personal techniques that I know, like I can't know that no other artist does, but ones that I definitely have figured out and created on my own, where every artist has something that they do specific to them. Like even taking Rothko with his works back in the day, his entire technique was laying colors down in extremely thin, like oil layers and just building upon that. And that's what pulled the emotion in, because his technique not only just looked like a giant, single color, but he would use even different like matte paint, shiny paint, etc., like gloss, all that stuff. So where depending on the perspective and angle of the piece you were looking at, it would look different, because he would lay down like,
Right.
gloss in certain areas on top of matte, and then like if the light caught it, you would see the gloss in very specific shapes. And a lot of that stuff is not captured in photography whatsoever when it comes to art.
Of course.
Just like with Pollock, like his most famous works were the very shortest period of his time creating, which was the splatter stuff.
Right, the one everyone
where that
knows.
was only, I believe, 2 years of his entire career, because he did a whole bunch of other works. It was very much in the realm of like Edvard Munch that did the Scream and stuff of that era, where even looking at the splatters, seeing it in person is a whole different experience, because there's a lot of technique in it. Like in a picture, it just looks like a bunch of paint splattered. But up close, you can tell he used the different materials. Like he would even use things like liquid aluminum that would then dry in the paint to give like a sheen.
Okay.
And different things like that, and broken glass and all kinds of things that do not pick up in pictures. So also with this kind of art, never judge it until you see it in person,
Well,
because
that's
it
a
does
great
not
rule.
pick up near as well in photography.
All right, well, let's go to some bad things to ask artists.
Oh, bad question.
What's the one question you get all the time that you get all the time, but you still hate it every time you're asked?
It just irks you so bad.
How many drugs do you do? I've went over that one already, but I hate it because I don't. Like, it's not that I am against people doing it if that's what they want to do. It's just, for me, they assume that to create things like what I do, you have to do drugs. And that's not the case at all.
So, kids, you don't have to do drugs to do great art.
Yeah.
Just stay sober.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
yeah.
to a certain
Well-
extent. I mean, go take your Advil and
Ibuprofen and
Yeah.
melatonin, especially.
I would say I have another very
recommendations.
good. I have another very good question to never ask an artist.
Yes,
Let's
please.
hear it.
Do not ever ask the meaning of the artwork, because 9 times
So
out
ask
of 10,
the background, but not the meaning.
Okay.
Yeah,
so the
because
meanings
9
of
times
that-
That's
out
actually
of
really
10,
important
our
distinction.
meanings are subjective, that we want the person to interpret it how they want to interpret it.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with what we put into it. Whereas, yeah,
All right,
a lot
that's-
of my art can show a lot of pain and melancholy, but I also do that in a way to invoke the feelings of what it can mean to them or what it draws out of them. It has nothing to do with what it meant to me when I created it. My own meaning is my own, but art is created to get people to feel.
So, so art is subjective, so it has to make the person feel something. Like,
Yeah.
And you should not have to
Yeah,
ask
and honestly,
that.
I feel like that is what defines art from other things like cartoon work and things. Where, yeah, you can be a cartoonist, but that doesn't necessarily mean artist, because you're not invoking the feelings. But you can also be an artist that does cartoons, but if it's done in a way that makes you feel, I feel like feeling is a lot of what makes art versus entertainment.
Well, I was going to try something funny, but that was just so, kind of profound. I don't
really
want to say
good way to
anything
end
like
it.
that. Like, honestly. Well, as we're kind of wrapping this whole thing up, I want to ask a day in the life of what it's marked like. Let's get the viewers to know who you
Oh
are.
boy. 9 times out of 10, I'm covered in cheese.
elaborate on that slightly for the listener? Not too much though.
I don't know
Still
if I
keep it
want
vague.
to. I kind of want to keep it
No,
mysterious.
no, I mean, like, you do your thing, man. Like,
No,
just be
okay.
honest.
So as my main job, I make Doritos. Like that's what I do. So
if,
the
if
art
you're
is
eating
a side
chips right
hustle.
now, you can thank this man.
Most likely I
If
probably
you're eating
made it.
Doritos right now,
Yeah, most likely
He made
I
them.
probably made them.
The 1% of people actually.
But so what I'll do is when I'm creating, I will get off work and I will go home and just get on my iPad and do a quick scribble to get something down. That's another thing that's very important is always do something every day, even if it's only 5 minutes. Just keep doing it, because if you
Love it.
don't,
I love that.
Well, because if you don't, you'll lose what you have. But if you at least do it 5 minutes a day, you're still like just at least maintaining. You might not be going up in skill, but at least you're maintaining what level you've hit.
So what I'm hearing right now is that all listeners like constantly engage in
Yeah.
what you love doing, even if you have a bad day.
Consistency.
Yeah, well, even if you have a bad day, whatever, you don't want to do it. Make sure you do it so you don't lose what you already have.
Because I mean, the 10,000 hour rule is very accurate, honestly. And just to keep practicing what you want to do, because you'll always improve it. And that's also one of the biggest things about being an artist that I hate is I never think my stuff is good. I always see room for improvement, but it's that drive that keeps me improving because I know I can with just keep practicing things I do.
I'm gonna give you something a little relatable for everyone who doesn't know. I was in a music conservatory for about 2-ish years, and I did everything from recording my own music to producing it, and I never released anything because I hated everything I did.
It's very true. But the other trick is to try and separate yourself from your own hatred of it, because that doesn't mean people aren't going to like it.
Well, I know, but like,
Because that's
you're
one
an
thing that I learn is everybody loves my stuff, and I personally am never happy with it. But just keep putting it out.
we are our own worst critics
It's
at the
very
end of the
true,
day.
Yeah.
Well, 100%. Like everything I thought I was going to put out was
Because
fucking
the
crap.
thing is with creating as well, you see all your own mistakes because you made them. Where like
Yes.
you could show something you've done to somebody, know every single mistake, but don't point it out, and
But
they're
they
gonna be
don't
like,
see the
"This is
mistakes.
amazing." Yeah. Whereas I
Something poetic
know
in that.
every single stroke, every single line that I messed up on, and that will bother me. But that's because I know it.
Well, honestly, I think on that note might be a great way to stop this, this whole podcast today. I want to thank everyone here, especially Dre's, for filming. We'll have some videos up here on YouTube too, a little bit. I want to thank all of our hosts and our host guest.
All of our hosts.
I'm a
host
host.
guest.
the host
Is that
with
like
the most.
is that like a parasite?
A host guest?
To be
No,
a
the
host
guest.
guest?
The guest host.
I
The
saw
host
that-
guest.
I saw the movie Parasite the other
The
day
other
with
way
like the Bay or whatever with like the fucking like things come out their tongues, and I'm like,
Haven't
With the
seen
what?
that
That's
one.
not.
But have you
Parasite.
seen the movie The Host? Because that was almost a Godzilla-esque monster movie.
I don't know. But anywho, we want to thank you guys so much for joining in. Make sure you guys follow Mark at.
MarkJones.art on Instagram.
And make sure you follow us because we're on Spotify now.
Yay.
We're on Spotify now, Assy.
Make sure you go check out Art Mart under Trips 2 Cents channel and follow us, subscribe, and make sure you're following in because every little bit helps.
And there was much rejoicing.
Much rejoicing happened, and we're going to celebrate after this, to be honest. So thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good day.
I would just leave
I'm leaving that in. I'm leaving that in.
Oh, God.
All right, guys.